guys, welcome to today's episode of The Bite. This is a really special one and it's very near and dear to my heart because we are making baqlawa or baklava as many people know it. This is a dessert that is enjoyed throughout the Middle East, throughout European countries like Greece, Albania, Turkey. In each country seems to have their own version, whether they twist their rendition of the syrup or the nuts that go into it. Today I'm showing you the version that I grew up eating, which is walnuts. And traditionally we do walnuts with a little bit of cinnamon, so I will add a little bit of cinnamon today. But we also enjoy it with pistachios, cashews, which is my personal favorite. Comment down below what's your favorite baqlawa. There's lots of different shapes, but I'm gonna show you the sunniya, which is the 9x13 pan, which I have right here. We are going to be using a 9x13 baking pan today, which is perfect because I'm sure everybody seems to have a 9x13 because it's great for casseroles and things like that, but this is today used for baqlawa. Traditionally, my mom, how we would do it at my house, would always make it in a big tray like this, which is a lot larger. It's actually double, which means it requires double the dough, double the filling, double the butter, and the everything. These trays are like gold to me because we have made so many delicious things on these. These actually came from my mom. So this is really good if you have a large family or if you're going to be feeding a large crowd. But a 9x13 works perfectly because it's good for a smaller group and it takes less time to make and there's less cutting involved because everybody knows when you make baqlawa at home, the cutting portion is the most tedious, but the most rewarding in the end. So I'm gonna go over the ingredients with you. I'm gonna put my tray away and then my oven is preheating to 350. So while that's going, we'll make the baqlawa. So let's go over the ingredients. So these are walnuts. They are very finely crushed like this. If you want them coarser, you can go ahead and do that. I just prefer them like this. We have semne or ghee. My semne, and I'll link it, my video for it above, has a particular spice that really makes a big difference in the final outcome of the dish. But if you have regular butter, you can use that as well. It just burns a little bit easier, so you may want to lower the temperature of your oven. I have my Attar, which is simple syrup, and I've made this for maybe a couple of videos in the past. This is just simple syrup that's been thickened, and I will show you how to make that in just a second. And then of course we have the phyllo dough. So if your package of phyllo dough has a number, you'll want to stick with number 4. I am using the Ziyad brand, and you'll see if the box has a picture of baqlawa on it, then you know it's the right kind for baqlawa. Otherwise, pick number 4. You'll need your 9x13. You will need a towel to cover the phyllo sheets that we are not working with so that they don't dry out, and that's very, very important. A knife to cut it and a pastry brush so that you can brush the butter on the phyllo dough. So let's get started. So first thing I'm gonna do is open up my phyllo dough, and then you wanna make sure that when you're working with phyllo dough that you take it out of your fridge. You'll definitely want to thaw it in the fridge at least overnight if it's in the freezer. But if you have it in the fridge, you want to bring it out about half an hour to 1 hour before you use it. So you can see that it's in half right now, and I want to cut it so that each sheet is this length. So let me show you. So you'll want to find the center of the dough, and I think I have it just about, hold on. There we go. So this is the center of the dough, and it's good because it's kind of perforated in the center for you, which will make it, there's the oven. It will make it easier for you to find the exact center. So now that I have the center, I'm going to cut it exactly where it's perforated, so that way it fits nicely in my 9x13. Okay, now that it's cut, I want to keep them in separate stacks because one half is gonna go on the bottom of the dish. We're gonna put the nuts in the middle, and then the other half is gonna go on the top. So it's important to keep them separated, or at least in a way that you can tell that they go for 2 different layers. So this is what I'm gonna do. I like to keep it on the plastic, and then one will be vertical and one will be horizontal, so that way I can put my towel directly over it, preventing them from drying out. So let's get started on making the baqlawa. So the first thing you'll want to do is take some of your ghee or your semne or your butter and make sure that your pan is very well greased. That will prevent the phyllo dough from sticking. All right, now it's time to layer. So growing up, we, for a long time, I mean many, many years, made this to where we would take each piece of phyllo dough and butter between each individual layer. As I got older and we were making it more and more, we just figured, hey, why don't we just do every other layer instead and reserve those calories, because that way we can have an extra piece of baklava and not feel so guilty about it. So that's what we did, and it seems like that's what a lot of other families do as well. I think this is one. So, and if you want to come close so that I can show you kind of what I do. So there's the first layer, and you can see that this portion is not fully covered. That is okay, because I'm just going to take the other piece of phyllo dough and align it so that it goes on this edge. So that way everything is covered. And that is how I continue to do it. But now that I have 2 layers, I'm going to take my pastry brush, kind of sprinkle the butter on, and then from there I can brush. So now that I've done the first layer, I just added 2 more layers of phyllo dough, and I'm just gonna keep doing this until we finish that first stack of phyllo dough, which means that we're at the center. So I'm just going to butter this the same way. I like to sprinkle and spread, sprinkle and spread. This is what I did as a kid. My mom would be the one making, like prepping everything, and I would help her with the baklava every year, if not multiple times a year. And I would always do it this way, sprinkle and spread, sprinkle and spread. And I just felt like it went a lot faster because I was using that big, huge tray. So I have very fond memories of baklava. This dessert is probably closer to my heart than kanafa is. As crazy as that sounds, because kanafa is like the king of all Middle Eastern desserts, but baklava is just something that I really, really grew up eating. So I'm gonna continue doing all of these layers, and I'll show you when we get to the middle and add all the filling. Here is the last layer before we add the filling. And you do definitely want to add butter to this layer so that the nuts have something to stick to the phyllo dough. So I'm going to keep this part covered, and then I'm going to bring the walnuts over here, add a touch of cinnamon. So here's the thing. When I was growing up, my mom would always use powdered sugar in the nut mixture to give it some extra sweetness. And as I, moved away, kind of built my own family and started testing these recipes on my own, I found that I preferred to have it without sugar in the center. And if I did, it was just a very small amount, because the attar, or the simple syrup that we pour on top after it bakes, adds just enough sweetness that I don't think you need it in the center. If you want to, you can add maybe a quarter, a third cup at a time, but you can do how I did it as a kid, because I would have to be the taste tester of the filling, and if it needed more sugar, which of course it always needed more sugar when you're a kid, then you just add more as you go. But because I'm sticking with tradition and how I always did it at home, I'm going to add a little bit of cinnamon, not necessary, just for traditional purposes. Give that a good stir. And I want to sprinkle a little bit of butter in here. That sounds a little bit odd, but it kind of just acts as a binder so that once these are baked, the filling doesn't fly all over the place and it stays in one spot for each piece. So I'm just gonna mix that up again. It's a great dessert to eat if you're on a diet, very keto friendly. All right, the filling is ready to get poured in. So I'm just going to pour it, and then I want to spread it out as evenly as possible. That looks pretty good, and yet again, I do want to sprinkle a little bit of butter on here so that that first sheet of phyllo dough can stick. And now it's back to the layers. So I just finished that first layer, and you can see some of the walnuts are a little bit exposed. So you want to make sure, again, kind of like I mentioned earlier, that you cover them with each double layer. And then the next double layer, I'm going to make sure that this side is covered. It won't affect the look, the taste, anything of the dish. As long as they're all covered, they won't become dry. So that's what we're going for here. Okay, so we are at the top layer. I'm going to lightly brush this with butter because I want it to stay in place before we cut it. If it helps, take off that last layer and just put a little bit of butter there and a tiny bit on that side so it stays in place while you're cutting it. It's a lot easier that way. Okay, so this is lightly brushed. I want to hang on to this last bit of butter because we are going to pour it in because there's not enough butter in here already. I'm going to pour some of it in between the cracks once we cut into it. So it's important to cut the baklava before it goes in the oven because if you cut it afterwards, phyllo dough becomes like a thin cracker, and if you cut it, it just crumbles, and there's no way to serve it like that. So you have to cut it beforehand so that when it bakes in that form. So what helps me is kind of creating an outline. So I know this is a 9 by 13 and I kind of want these to be smaller pieces. So I kind of just go boop, boop, boop. So now I'm gonna start cutting these lines all the way down as evenly as possible. You want to make sure that you're getting it to the very, very bottom because otherwise, when you're going to take a piece of the baklava from the tray and the bottom layer is not fully cut, it's hard to take that piece out. So you want to make sure that you're cutting it from top all the way to the bottom. Beautiful. So I cut that into 6 even lines, or 5 lines, but 6 individual pieces. And now the traditional shape is to cut them into diamonds. So what I'm going to do is cut it from here down, then from the second line down, the third corner down. You could do them in squares. That is probably a lot easier, but this is how it's traditionally done. So this is how we're gonna do it. Sometimes they'll stick to your fingers, and that's why I said it was a good idea to put butter in between those top 2 layers, but that's okay. You can just stick it right back on, and we are going to butter it so that everything will stay in place. We're gonna add that last layer of butter up on top. Don't worry, this happens to everybody, I promise. Okay, once you've reached this point and there's no more corners to follow, I like to flip it around and do the same exact thing on this side. Then you'll be left with a little segment to which you can just cut it in half. I think it's a lot easier and comes out a lot more even that way. So that's what I'm gonna do here. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, the point of this is not perfection. Just take your time with it. I mean, this is not a dessert that you want to make in a rush. Nothing turns out right when you make things in a rush, but especially something like this, you really want to put your time and your heart into it and just, be patient. You'll get there. So both sides are even, and you can totally leave these big pieces, but I'm just gonna cut them in half so that I don't get in trouble and eat all those big pieces myself. So this is cut perfectly. We are ready to stick this up in the oven in just a second. I have my extra semne here, and you can't really use a pastry brush for this because all the pieces will go all over the place. So I am taking a teaspoon and pouring this all along the edges, including down the centers. Everywhere you see an open cut, this is where I'm gonna pour the butter. I think that looks good. So we are ready to stick this in the oven. This buttered up baby is going into the oven at 350 degrees for about 45 minutes. You will see the top getting golden brown. You want them to be slightly on the darker side because once we add the syrup in, it does kind of lighten the color up a little bit. So I want it to have a golden crunch or golden look and crunch after we add the syrup. So I'm gonna put this in about 45 minutes. And in the meantime, let me show you how I made the attar. To make the attar, you want to combine 2 cups of sugar with 1 cup of water. You stir it so that the sugar doesn't burn at the bottom of the pot, and then once it comes to a boil, you want to add a little bit of lemon juice, and the lemon juice helps prevent any crystallization from forming. It doesn't add the lemony flavor though. Once it looks like this, it is ready. Golden brown, crispy perfection was in the oven for about 35 minutes, not 45. 35 gave it the perfect color that I was looking for. I'm going to pour the cooled syrup over the hot baklava, but I wanted to let this cool for about 5 minutes because if the baklava was too hot, when I poured the syrup over it, there would be steam coming out, which would make the baklava less crispy, and I want it to be as crispy as possible. So that's why I made this attar earlier, so that it has ample time to cool off and it's the perfect temperature to put over the baklava. It's not like refrigerator cold, and you don't really want it to be that cold. You want it to be room temperature, if not a little bit warmer. So now I think this is ready. I have pistachios here that are finely ground. I like to keep these in the in the freezer, because I top a lot of desserts off with these. Even things like sahla, which I have a video for. It's like a warm drink that we have during this time of year. But I'm going to pour this in, just like I did with the butter. I want it to get in the crevices as much as possible. I may not use all of this. Eyeball it to your liking, but I don't think this tray is gonna need all of this, but we'll see. Let's go. So I added all the attar that I wanted. I added about a cup, maybe a little bit more than a cup. That's how I like it, but you can keep some on the side to top off later. It's kind of cooling on the edges, and that's okay, because it's gonna sink to the bottom and give you that crispy, sweet crunch in every nook and cranny, and that's what you want. So you need to let this sit for a little bit, but because the attar is already on top and it's got the stickiness to it, this is the perfect time to top each piece with the pistachios. So that's what I'm gonna do right here. And it doesn't need to be perfect, but I don't want it to look super messy. Now I'm gonna let this sit for another few minutes. Look at how much life that adds to the dish. Any kind of green, anything, for some reason just brings dishes to life. Pistachios are a necessity. It is a traditional topping that you add to many of our desserts, but this in particular. So I'm gonna let this sit for a little bit and then eat it, and I will show you in just a second. All right, I am ready to dig in. I'm just gonna cut myself a piece. Look at that. Just look at that. Those layers of the walnuts. You squeeze it and the syrup comes out. It's warm. I like baklava warm, but you can eat it cold, however you like. It's not Christmas without this. Every year we would make this, give it to our neighbors, and now I get to share it with you. So I hope you enjoyed this. Give this a try, because it is so incredibly easy. You don't need to buy boxed baklava. You can have it warm in your own home, homemade, so easy. The hardest part is really just cutting it into the diamond, but you can cut it however you like. You can have one big old sheet of baklava if you want to. So I hope you enjoyed this. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to be notified of when I post videos. I have so many good things coming up through the end of the year and to the beginning of the year as well. I hope you enjoyed this and recreate this in your home. And don't forget to send me a picture when you do, because I love seeing that. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next time on The Bite.